Greetings, vagrants. You're getting closer to solving the murder mystery, if not to resolving it. For newcomers, directions are in the description if you would like to participate, but otherwise, let's go ahead and get into it. Recounting Tuesday's events before we set into Wednesday. Uneasy about last night's events, Paul Norsky chooses to spend the day hanging around Mitchell. Mitchell spends most mornings reading the daily paper, an amalgam text covering Sallow County and its small cities, towns, and villages. Jinko's subscription brings 50 copies into camp each day, and these copies are distributed freely on a first-come, first-served basis. Paul Norsky, with Mitchell, collects a paper from the market tent and settles in for some easy morning reading. The paper discusses none of the weekend's 4 murders. Mitchell notes vagrant murders usually go at least mentioned in the paper, almost like a scoreboard for native residents. Squander's segment of the paper brims with diatribes against vagrants, Jinko, and the government. There are accusations of federal collaboration with, quotes, beings above and below the mountains. This reporter's solution? Nothing but the total death of vagrants and G-men. These rants are penned by one Janie Barber, a reporter local to Squander. Ellis Baker enters the Tabernacle of the Wayward to pray for good fortune. It's quiet. The tabernacle is empty. There are a few chairs, but there are more blankets spread across the ground. Facing them is a humble altar. Ellis Baker comes before the altar, kneels, and prays. Losing track of time, he reviews recent events and his feelings on them. When he re-enters the world, he notices someone is securing something around his neck. It's a necklace. More specifically, it's a crucifix. Behind him stands Father Cornelius Wolfram, a tall, slender man whose disfigurements resemble, though don't match, Ellis Baker's. Not to protect you, Cornelius says. To remind you you are protected. Always. He pats Ellis Baker's shoulder and ducks back out of the tabernacle. Now we enter the afternoon. Paul Norsky spends the afternoon working alongside Mitchell felling trees. He earns $1 for his work. Work is tedious, and one's temperature is always too hot or too cold performing manual labor in such parts of the nation. During a brief break, Paul Norsky scans his surroundings. There's logging equipment, men and women at work, and forests as far as the eye can see from this elevation. However, he spots something moving around a distant clearing. He can barely make it out. Then it turns its head, and Paul Norsky sees its face. From this distance, it looks chimeric, like someone tore apart and stitched together the heads of a dog and a pig. Then the creature disappears. Frozen, Paul Norsky stares at the now empty spot in the distance. When Mitchell fetches him, Paul Norsky explains what he saw, and Mitchell suggests it was Bigfoot, and then both men return to work. Some distance away, Ellis Baker follows the path he memorized toward the hidden garden. The brush is thick, but he maneuvers it with ease. He finds the plants and collects 2 doses, enough to make a difference, but not so much the amount would be missed. Before returning to camp, Ellis Baker feels his way back to the spot with perfect natural and industrial harmonies. For the second time that day, Ellis Baker kneels and prays. And now we enter night. In the evenings, Mitchell, like many other Fog residents, hangs around the canvas-covered bar and gets painfully drunk. To shadow Mitchell appropriately, Paul Norsky spends the 50 cents he's been carrying in his pocket to drink too much too quickly. It's good he wasn't carrying more money. He might have spent it. Normally observant and reserved, Paul Norsky joins vagrants in cards, horseshoes, and arm wrestling. Everyone's drinking more than they should. For citizens who find themselves in the fog, such indulgence is only natural. Paul Norsky drinks enough he'll regret it, but not so much he'll really regret it. The night passes with much revelry, but little worth noting. When Ellis Baker exits his trance, night has fallen. The moon is out. The forest is quiet. Silent, actually, Ellis Baker notes. That's irregular. Now there is neither hum of industry nor hum of nature. It's just dark. Ellis Baker begins his trek back to camp but he takes his time. He reflects on the madman's words about a beast, one of horror and hatred. He imagines it. Conjured by Ellis Baker's imagination and cast against a canvas of shadows, this beast takes different forms. In one form, it's a werewolf. In another, a gangster with a hook for a hand. Another, a snake with glowing eyes wrapped around a tree. The form his imagination settles on is odd. It's a boy. The boy is draped in darkness, but otherwise he's unremarkable. Ellis Baker stops walking and considers the image he's conjured. He tries to make sense of it. Then the boy steps forward. This isn't Ellis Baker's imagination. This is reality, and the low unease that has been trailing Ellis Baker since he started walking pools around the boy. He's a teenager, a younger one, and he wears a bandana around his mouth and a baseball cap with a fish on it on his head. Something about him is wrong. Ellis Baker would have heard him approach. The boy comes closer. He's unarmed. His eyes shine in the moonlight. They shouldn't do that. Ellis Baker can't move. When the boy reaches out to touch him, something shocks Ellis Baker into action. With the strength of an avenging angel, Ellis Baker smashes his crucifix across the boy's face. The boy falls backward and holds the place where the crucifix struck. The bandana covered most of it, but there are small angular burns across the boy's exposed skin. He's crying. Before Ellis Baker can react, the boy disappears into the shadows. He leaves no footprints or any evidence of his presence other than bits of flesh still searing across Ellis Baker's crucifix. Ellis Baker doesn't walk, but doesn't run, back to camp. On screen are the character sheets beginning Wednesday. Player vagrants have officially encountered the monster of the week. You managed not to die and to get a hit in. Frankly, I was afraid the entire week would pass without an encounter. You might have enough time to figure out at least what's going on, if not to kill the thing. If killing the thing is what you want to do. I guess we're going to find out, but this is exciting. Tune in next time to see what happens. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't.